Now, some basic guidelines. First of all, if you're canning according to a recipe, and they are called recipes, follow the recipe. All right? If it says to fill it so high, fill it so high. If it says to put something in it, put something in it. Now, when you talk about spices and stuff, then it's not such a big deal. But basic ingredients, a lot of these things, it will can better, especially if a lot of these meals in the jar you stack in there, layer in there. And it cooks better when it's layered in according to how the recipe says. This has been tested by people. People have tried it, and this is what they found to work the best. But especially on your basic recipes, follow your recipes. Okay, that's important. All right. Make sure the proper amount of water is in your canner. And when you put your water in your canner, you have to make sure, like especially if you're canning with like half pints, and a lot of times even pints, you know, you want to make sure that your water doesn't come up to the rim, the bottom of your ring. Your ring is on here. You don't want the water up to the bottom of the ring. You're not water bathing, you're canning. If the water's at the bottom of your ring, it'll siphon water into the jar when it starts cooling. Okay? So I generally don't have my water more than halfway up the jar. When I get full jars put in the canner, if the water comes up more than halfway from the jar, I usually take some out, because usually that's plenty of water. Like I said, 3 quarts is a standard, 2 inches, something like that. I put a little bit more in for meat and beans that can longer. The other thing is, if you have short jars, okay, a lot of times what I will do is I will put something else in the bottom of the canner to lift the jars up. They do not have to be in the water. The water is not to cook the stuff in the jars. The water is to generate steam. Alright? So, for example, hang on just a second, let me grab this. I have this rack here. Now, if I was going to do a bunch of these, but not a whole bunch, enough to do like one level, I would put this in my granite ware, because this has got a lip on it that's about, I don't know, maybe 6 inches above, 5 inches above the bottom. And this sets on that lip, so I can stack my jars on this up out of the water where the water doesn't come up to the jars. So remember, it's not the water that cooks, it's the steam and pressure. Your jars do not have to be in water. So always make sure your water level never comes up to the rims. No more than half the jar, generally speaking. All right? Now, again on water, if your recipe is a hot pack, in other words, what you're putting in the jars is hot, make sure your jars are hot before you put the hot product in your jars, and then make sure your canner is hot when you put the hot jars in the canner, so you're putting hot jars in the hot water. If your jars are cold, you're cold packing, then make sure your water in your canner is not hot. It can be warm, but not hot, because it will crack your jars. All right? Cold pack, cooler water, hot pack, hot water. Now, headspace. Headspace is important. Every recipe will tell you have to have so much headspace. Now, let's see which one would be best to see this on. Let's do it on this one. Headspace, like I said, usually ½ inch or 1 inch. The bottom of this lip right here, that is 1 inch head clearance. Your lid's going to sit on top. See? That's 1 inch head clearance. So you can always measure there. You don't need a measurer. If you want to measure, get one of those debubblers that has a measurer on it, and you can measure. But down to that lip right there is 1 inch. In a regular jar, and this is what I like about my funnel, this is 1 inch. In my regular jar, that's 1 inch. I come to the bottom of the funnel. Okay, it's actually a little bit more than 1 inch, but not enough to make a difference. So I just come to the bottom of the funnel in regular mouth jars. But leave your headspace. It's important in the process. If your headspace is too little, based on what you have in there, it will siphon out. And then you get food particles and stuff under your lid, and it won't seal. All right. We talked about debubbling. Debubbling is important. Anytime you have anything in there, a lot of times, even if it's like, unless it's just liquid, if it's got any kind of solids in it whatsoever, just give it a stir. It won't hurt anything. And you need to get those extra bubbles out of there. Because first of all, once it starts heating up, if there's bubbles in there, that will increase your headspace. It won't can properly. The other thing is, if there's air bubbles in there, it will generate more pressure within the jar. If there's too much air in there, it will make too much pressure in the jar, and it could crack your jars. So it's very important to make sure you debubble and get all those little air pockets out of there. And we mentioned this before, wipe your rims. After you're all through and you're ready to put your lids on, you need to wipe your rims. Again, if you're using beans, meat, anything that has oil in it of any kind, use vinegar to wipe your rims. And you just take it and just simply take your paper towel, just wipe the top of the rim off. Don't pick the jar up and do it. You don't want to tilt the jar. See, that's another thing. You have to be careful once you get food product in your jar. Don't tilt your jar, because it's not sealed. And you don't want to get any food particles or liquid from the jar up in under the lid. So it's setting on the counter, and you can see on my other videos, I just wipe the jars sitting on the counter. If they're hot, just get you a pot holder and put around it and hold it to wipe the jars, and get your jars wiped. You can move them. Make sure you keep them level. If you need to move them to wipe them, if you got them stacked too close together, just make sure they're level. Wipe your jars. You can use regular hot water for basic things, vinegar for oily things. Next, you put your lids on, your flats on. All right, you've got your food in there. You're going to take your flat out. You're going to take your lid out. All right, then you're going to take, don't touch the inside of the lid. You're going to take your lid, set it on there. Then you're going to take your ring, put your ring on there, and screw it down till it stops. And then if it's hot, you have to hold it, and then just 3 fingers, 2 fingers, whatever, depends on your strength. Then you just snug it down, finger tight. That's it. Don't over tighten it. If you over tighten it, it's going to be too tight to get the air out of the jar, and it'll cause the rim, the lid to buckle, and may generate a false seal or something like that. So you don't put it on too tight. We always call it finger tight, and I realize some people's finger tight's more than other people's finger tight. But basically, you put the jar down snug, and then you just give it a little snug down. Okay? Called finger tight. Again, don't tilt your jar. You don't want to tilt your jar once you get your lids on, especially because you don't want to get stuff on the rims that you don't know about. All right. Then you put it in your canner. You put your lid on your canner and you lock your lid down. Now, most of these, it sets, there's notches in the lid that sets in and clamps down, goes a certain way. Practice that before you get ready so you know how to do it, and then get it locked down. And once it's locked down, your heat's on, it starts steaming up. Then you're going to let it get working hard and boiling and steaming, steam will come out this center, like I showed you, the center steamer vent. Steam will come out of there. When you get a good flow of steam, it's got to be a good flow, because the purpose is to get the air out of the canner. Gets a good flow of steam out there, then you time it for 10 minutes and let it release the air inside there, steam out for 10 minutes. I usually wait until my side vent that's in the handle, until I can get it to stay up. Sometimes I play with it. After it's been steaming for so long, I might play with that a little bit. Not with your fingers, it'll burn you. But like with a wooden skewer or something, and just flip it, and if it stays up, then I start timing in. Or I'll wait till it just comes up and stays up itself. And once it does that, you know you can start your timer, or 10 minutes. You let it vent for 10 minutes. After it vents for 10 minutes, then you put your weight on. Most of these weights, they got springs in there, they just snap on. So once your weight is on, then you have to wait until it starts its little jiggle, its little dance, its little spin, or whatever it does. That some different weights do different things. Okay, it used to be on the dials, if I remember right, you would get it up to, it would jiggle all the time. But these are weighted, so when the pressure reaches over 15 pounds in my case, it'll make it move. It'll jiggle, it'll dance, it'll spin, it'll do something. And it'll make it move. Alright, that's when you know when to start timing your time to can. Do not time your pressure can until that weight starts to do its little dance. Now, the electric canner is a little different. I don't have to worry about that with the electric canner. Okay, it takes care of all that itself. And it says in the manual that it will, you know, steam will probably come out there all the time once it gets started. Speaking of electric canner, one more thing about that. When you get an electric canner, you need to make sure that it is a canner. I don't know if that's readable or not. But it's a canner, not a cooker. It can also cook, but it is a canner. All canners can cook, but not all cookers can. It has to reach a certain temperature and pressure inside there and maintain that and be regulated based on the weights and everything, the way it's set up, in order for it to work. So Instapots, for example, electric Instapots are generally not canners. They're cookers. I think they might make one now that is, but don't quote me on that. But it has to be a canner and not a cooker. So that, I forgot to tell you that when I talked about the canner. Once your weight starts its dance, its jiggle, its wiggle, it's spinning around, some of them spin around, whatever it does. Once it starts doing that, it'll do that about every two or three times a minute. Might even do a little more. You can adjust your temperature, but you want it at least to do it 2 or 3 times a minute. That way you know you're maintaining the pressure. I use a gas stove. I put mine on high from start to finish. I don't ever touch my temperature control hardly at all. I just let it go, and it does great. Okay, it's not a, you know, it's not a massive gas stove. It does perfect. You have to regulate that according to your stove. And remember, and I'm sure if you have an electric stove, you know this. Electric stove is not instantaneous anything. It's got to build up the heat, and while it may seem like it's just right, that heat may not be all the way built up. And when you turn it down, it's got to let down the heat, and it does slowly. So you have to be more careful with an electric stove. And then you also have to be careful if you have a glass top electric stove. There's some of these canners that are just too heavy for those, they say. I don't know. I don't use electric stove. I just heard people talk about it. Find out. Okay? Find out for yourself. A glass top stove, I would be hesitant about using a double canner on. It's heavy. Plus, if it's electric and you're using a double canner, and you have to, once you turn it off, you need to move it off that burner, because that burner is not going to be instantly down. It's going to take a while for it to cool down. So you'll need to move it off. That dude can get heavy when it's full. Just a word of advice. But I use a gas stove, so when I shut mine off, it shuts off. I keep it on the same burner. I keep it on high. Just be careful about that if you use an electric stove. Keep that in mind. Don't forget that. All right. Now, once your canning time is over, you turn your heat off. Or take your canner off the heat if it's electric. And then you just leave it alone. It's not like some of these cookers where they tell you, you can release the steam and that sort of stuff, because that's cooking, it's not canning. If you release your steam too rapidly when you're pressure canning, it could cause a vacuum loss in your jars, and it could just bubble all your stuff out. It could just draw it all out. So, let it cool naturally. Yes, it will take some time. It may take an hour, 30 minutes, an hour, or something like that. Let it cool naturally. Don't try to hurry it. Don't check it every 5 minutes. Let it cool naturally. It doesn't hurt it to stay in there longer. It can hurt it if you try to take it out sooner. I generally wait till the vent valve in the lid, in the handles goes down. See, when it reaches a certain pressure, that will go up. That is probably like 10 pounds, maybe 5 pounds, I don't know. When it reaches a certain pressure, it will go up and seal, basically. And stay sealed through the canning process because the pressure in there is so high. But once the pressure's down, it'll go down. It'll come open. It'll open up. I generally wait till that goes down before I touch it. Alright? Then when you open it up, always make sure that you open it up with the lid facing away from you. It's real easy when you're sitting on the stove to open it up and do the lid like this. You're going to get a face full of steam. There's still steam in there. There's still heat in there. You will get burned. When you take the lid off, open it up away from you. Alright? So, just a precaution there. Open it up away from you. Alright? We want to keep you safe. Then, you use your jar getter, and you take your jars out one at a time. I would highly recommend, if there's any kind of breeze blowing through the area, shut that down while you take these off. Take these out. Okay? Any sudden coolness hitting these hot jars could crack them. Just, I've never had that happen, but I'm just saying. Be careful. They're hot. Take the jars out, set them off to themselves, figure out where you're going to set them, because once you set them there, and again, put them on a towel. Don't put them on a cold countertop. If you have marble, granite, tile, even laminate countertops, it can be cold. You may not think so touching it, but you put a hot jar on there and it's going to know it's cold. So put it on a towel or a cutting, I don't know if cutting board work, but anything, a wire rack or something, but then you take a chance of tilting it over. Just put it on a towel. Be careful you don't tilt your jars. Now remember, this is held by your grip. Don't let it go. Don't tilt your jars. When you take it out, lift it straight up, carry it straight, set it down straight. Don't tilt your jars. It's not sealed yet. You get something up underneath that lid and it's going to not seal. So don't tilt your jars. Keep them level. Keep them straight. Set them off to the side wherever you want to leave them, and leave them for at least 24 hours. Don't touch them. Don't hurry the process. The cooling down process takes time. Yes, a lot of times you'll hear your jars popping. That means they're sealing. When they pull that lid down on the end from the vacuum in there, it pops. A lot of times you can hear it. Alright? Even if it does that, it's not final sealed until it cools completely. Let it set for 24 hours. Once it's set for 24 hours, then you can test it. Just tap the center of it. If the center of the lid moves, it's not sealed. Put it in the refrigerator. Use it. It's not sealed. It's been hot enough after 24 hours, usually it's not going to go bad. If you have a problem, throw it out. I usually just take it, put it in the refrigerator, and then I'll eat it. But you can tap the center of it. If it moves at all, it's not sealed. Next, you take the rings off, and I do the thumb check. I'll just take it and, I don't have a jar here, should have had one. But I'll just take it and here, let me do this. Okay, it's sealed on. I just take it with my thumbs, and I just kind of flick it. Okay, and if it's not sealed, it'll pop up. Okay, you can still get a false seal every once in a while. All right, you still get a false seal, and both those checks might seem like it's sealed. You set it off to the side. A week or so later, you go back and that seal's broken and you got bad product. It happens. That's why you always check your food. Check your seal when you open the jar. Make sure it's good and sealed. Check your food, smell it, look at it. If in doubt, throw it out. Okay? Always check your food. You are your own quality control. So I remove my rings, check my seals. I do the thumb, you know, and I hit it pretty hard to see if I can, you know, I don't really try because then you can break a seal because it's still a young seal. But I flip it up. If it doesn't flip off, I assume it's sealed. After that, I may spend 24 hours. I may leave it set a little longer, or I may go ahead and wash my jars. And I wash my jars when I'm done, especially if I had some siphoning in there, and everybody has siphoning. Like I said, I've been doing this for over 50 years. I still get some that's siphoned. So I still get food product in my canner because it's siphoned out of the jar. I can still get a seal, but I can still get siphoning. So you have to be careful and check it. So I wash them off. And I wash around the rims, especially around the rims, say where the rings have been, because that'll hold stuff in there. And I wash my jars. And trust me, it's a lot easier to do when you have vinegar and hard water, because then you don't have that white crust on the outside. But I wash my jars off, I wash my rims off, and then I dry them. I don't let them air dry, I dry them myself. I don't let that water dry on the lids or anything. I dry them off, and then I label them. Now you can do that with a permanent magic marker on the top of the lids, because like I said, for pressure canning, these are disposable. You will find people will say they reuse these. I don't. I don't recommend it. I don't do it. Once it's been used, and I have to take this off, especially if it's a good seal, I use a bottle opener. One of these things right here to take it off. And most of the time, that will bend, no matter how careful you are, that will bend the lid. So I never reuse them. Sometimes I will save some if I'm going to vacuum pack something temporarily in a jar. I've got a vacuum sealer that has a lid that goes on and will vacuum seal in a jar. Sometimes I will use lids. I'll wash them and use them for that if it's something that's going to be temporary, but not very often. So I don't reuse them, they throw away. So you can write on that with a permanent marker what it is and the date, so that you know. I usually put the month and the year. Sometimes I'll put the day, especially if I'm doing several batches. When I had a garden, and like when I was doing green beans, I'd mark the day, because in 1 month I might do 2 batches of green beans. So I mark the day, so I try to use my oldest product first. Or what I've started doing now is I've found in my closet back there that I have 3-4 packs of these address labels. You know, peel and stick ones that we used to use in the computer, and just run them through and print all these. When you're doing multiple mailings, you do that. And so I had a bunch of those, so I just use those now to put on my lids. And I can put what it is, and especially for my meals in a jar, I can put what it is and the date on it. All right. Once it's labeled and dated, then you can store it. However you can store it, and you can store them in a lot of different places. All right. Well, that's pretty much it. Pressure Canning 101. I don't know that I covered everything. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I just play one on Facebook and YouTube. But that's it in a nutshell. It's a big nutshell, isn't it? But I may have left some things out. If I had, feel free to write, ask me questions, send me an email, make a comment on the video, check me out on Facebook with a message or something, if you're my friend or something like that. Anyway, I'll be glad to answer any questions about it that you have, any way I can help you. I believe in canning. I love canning. I believe in food preparation. I believe in having food on hand, because let me tell you, there may be a time when you need it, and pressure food will last a long time, and it will generally last longer than they say it will. Again, the bottom line is, you be your own safety officer. You be your own safety control. You determine for yourself what's good for you and your family. That's it. From my kitchen to your kitchen. God bless.